So I find myself repeating some of the conversations that some of the words that I'm going to speak now often in my life. So uh, I kind of want to talk about the difference between connectedness and being authentic. And so, and then I'm going to talk about that in the pretext of kind of this Western and democratic ideology. Um, I am not by any means an expert on any of this stuff. This has just been my own revelations about and understanding on things. And I'll explain why it's so important to develop an understanding about this as we once I kind of explain the thoughts. So I don't know if anyone follows Gabor Mate, but he's a child psychologist, and he talks a lot about this need for authenticity versus connectedness, right? And so he boils it down to two very simple concepts. So connectedness, this 2-year-old child is with their parents, right? They can't survive without their parents. There's no world where a child can survive without adult supervision, right? And that's kind of understood. That's the reason why all the hero origin stories all start with the parents dying, because that's the most awful and horrible thing that can happen to a human child, right? And we don't really function until the age of 10 independently. It just doesn't work. Um, and so that's where the need for connectedness comes from, because at a biological level, we understand we will not survive till without other people. And then on the other side of it, there's this need for authenticity, right? So that 2-year-old child is hungry, and so they need to communicate that they're hungry. Well, let's say that the kid is crying, and the parent strikes them because the parent doesn't want to hear them crying. Well, now what occurs in the child's mind is a conundrum, right? They need to be able to say, I'm hungry, I need food, but they also need their parent. And so, how do they respond, right? And so, the psychological dilemmas that occur when you have these conflicts between authenticity and connectedness is astronomical, right? And it's horrible, because the things that spawn from this is maybe an eating disorder later in life, or maybe they sneak food, or maybe they start stealing, or something. I'm being very simplistic with the concept, but basically, fundamentally, the point is that we have a need for connectedness, and we have a need for authenticity, and oftentimes they conflict with each other. And so, why is this important in terms of Western versus kind of an Eastern ideology? Well, if you boil down Western ideology, it's this kind of thought process that everyone is assumed to be authentic-ish, i.e., they will do what they say they're going to do, right? And they're trustworthy in that sense. They automatically get a certain level of trust. Um, and so this Western ideology of kind of independence and free thinking, free choice, because ultimately, right, the person needs to be connected to their community. So even while being authentic, they're generally going to make the best decision for their communities. Um, Whereas when you talk about Eastern ideology, it's more of a fixation or on systems or community, right? The community itself, right? So this belief that the community first, so whoever the grandma, grandpa, right, or whoever the matriarch or the patriarch, or the senior person within the organization, the community is the leader, and you don't defy that. You don't ever breach from that. Um, and it's this so hyper. Again, I'm being very simplistic and not remotely an expert, but this is how I've come, and I've lived in both Eastern and Western cultures. And so there's this, so anyone in a position of authority as is to be revered, right? And there's a certain level of respect granted to them that you just won't see in Western culture. Um, and that to me is rooted in this difference between like a fixation on the connectedness, right? These two biological needs, and they are biological needs. There's neuroscience studies that show that prolonged isolation has the same neurological impacts as being, bitten by a bullet ant, right? In terms of how your physiology responds to the prolonged periods of isolation, right? And then we obviously, if we don't communicate, I need food, I need shelter, I need water, or I need love, I need something, right? If I can't say that, then I'm also not being authentic. And so that's why it's a fundamental need. And so, why is this so important, though? Why kind of going back to the beginning, why did I bother to kind of break it down and come to an understanding? And that's because, especially nowadays, we if we don't understand the root of why we think the way we think, um, and why and what side we're on when it comes to ideas and things, then we, we won't ever be able to make a choice that is actually moral, because we are constantly adapting to our environment. It is a reactive stance, not a proactive stance. And what's fundamentally bad about that reactive stance is that you will find yourself doing things that are so morally appalling, you will be lost. And so, maybe I've mentioned it on this channel before, but I grew up in a cult, and I can tell you unequivocally that, um, people, if you don't have a moral stance on something, eventually someone will violate it, right? If you don't take the time to think through the process, eventually you will be taken advantage of. Um, and nowadays, with the things going on with Trump, and then China with, the conflict that is ever looming and growing bigger in the horizon, um, you if you don't have a stance, if you don't have kind of a better understanding of what you actually believe, right? And if you don't have a good understanding of the world and what's actually happening around you, then you're gonna find yourself doing some things that, that I'm sure some people in my cult, would never have imagined themselves doing, that they did eventually. I don't I don't want to see the harms and the evil that I experienced perpetuated. And so I just ask that you sit down and you figure out what you really believe. Me personally, I believe in this idea that trust the person first, give them the benefit of the doubt until they lose that benefit. Believe that most people function for the sake, will, when given the opportunity, will work in the best interests of their community. Uh, build a high trust society, right? Meaning, I don't have to micromanage what my neighbor's doing. I don't have to micromanage what, the person down the street is doing. I know that fundamentally, sure, we might have our differences in opinion on some things, but fundamentally, we're going to work for each other. And so, that's the world I want to live in. I hope that's the world you want to live in, especially after you've taken the time to think through the process, do some reading, do some research, and understand it for yourself. Um, so that's been my journey the last couple months. Actually, years really, but it's been far more concerted effort. And I implore you all to take the same process. Thank you.